Gosh, thank you so much, and thank you all so much for allowing me to be back with you again, Deb. I appreciate it very, very much. You know, this is the 8th time in a row that I've gotten to speak to you guys, and I've been up here on the first Monday at your first meeting of the year. And my good friend David Wilkinson, Ambassador, my predecessor, Mr. Ambassador, it's always a pleasure to be with you. David, as Speaker, spoke to this club 11 times in a row as the Speaker of the House. So with me now, this being my 8th time, that makes 19 times. So I'm looking for a 20th anniversary celebration. I just want everybody to know that. So I've already asked Deb, please let me come back next year and let's have some kind of, well, I guess y'all might just, maybe y'all are tired of me being here. So maybe Deb says we'll have cake. So that'll be good. We'll have cake. That'll be great. First of all, as I said, thank you for letting me be here and letting me come and talk a little bit about what's going on in Columbia, talk a little bit about what's gone on in Columbia. But I want to start out by telling you how much we appreciate everything, or I appreciate everything that you do as a business community, as Republicans, as conservatives, things that you do for South Carolina. Deb, you particularly, frankly, and the efforts that you do keeping this club together, you know, it is incredibly important that people stay actively engaged and involved in government at the local level, at the state level, at the federal level, and if there's an example of a group of folks that do that, it is this club and your participation. So first of all, thank you so much for your involvement and what you do. You have a great delegation representing you in Columbia too. I want to make sure that you are aware of that. Several of them are here today. I'll introduce the folks who are here. Bruce Bannister, who is the new Majority Leader of the South Carolina House of Representatives. Bruce, stand up and let everybody congratulate you on being the new Majority Leader. You know, Bruce sits in the seat that David Wilkins sat in, and David Wilkins sat in the seat that Rex Carter sat in as the Speaker of the House previously. So I told Bruce, buddy, you got serious shoes to follow. I wish you luck. But not now. Also, we have with us today Dan Hamilton. Dan Maria, Dan's here. Dan, welcome. It's good to be here with you. Phyllis Henderson. And Phyllis, good to see you. And Gary Smith, I saw over here somewhere. Gary's good to have you here. And you have my favorite USC quarterback here today. I don't know if how many of y'all are aware of that, but Mike Fair played quarterback for Carolina. What year is Mike?
1902.
1902, 3, and 4. Actually, I saw some pictures of you online. I actually emailed them to you. I don't know if you've gotten it. If you haven't, then I'll send them again. I need to get your email address. But I was seeing something about, actually it was during the Carolina-Clemson game, and they had something on GoGamecocks.com or something where they had some pictures of you back on whatever year that was. I don't know. I guess 1903, based on what you're telling us right now. But anyway, my favorite USC quarterback is Senator Mike Fair. Mike, it's good to be with you also today. You know, as I think you know, South Carolina is a conservative-minded, pro-business, beautiful place to live, work, and raise a family. And I can tell you that your General Assembly wants to keep it that way, particularly those of us who are Republicans, who are working hard to make sure that we stay conservative-minded, pro-business, and a great place to live. On your table, we brought a little handout for you so that you can see what the Republican agenda is for this coming year. I won't go over that in detail one by one, but in case you're interested in what that is, what the agenda is, what we're trying to accomplish, the House Republican Caucus met several times in the fall, and this is the result of that agenda that we put together. And like I said, we just thought you might see it, so we brought it for you so you could take a few minutes and look at it. Now, that is certainly not everything that we plan to do in this coming legislative session, but we did want to just be able to have a specific agenda, be able to outline some things we thought were important. Frankly, we think they're important based on what we've heard you say and other citizens around South Carolina say over the last few years. Now, I'll go over some of the major items in a minute, but first, I want to make sure that I explain what I believe, what I think most of you who know the difference between your state government and Washington is a major distinction between Washington, D.C. and your state government in South Carolina. Sometimes people, when they're frustrated at what they see going on in Washington, tend to blend the two together. I mean, we're all elected, right? So people tend to kind of let those things overlap. And the reality is there is a marked difference between what's happening in Washington today and what happens in Columbia. You know, in South Carolina, in case you aren't aware, we pass a balanced budget every single year. Now, I'm pleased that our state constitution requires it, because that certainly makes it easier to make sure everybody does that. But every single year, while you're hearing about all the red ink going on in Washington, you can know that in South Carolina, the budget is balanced. There may be an argument over what money's spent on. There may be an argument over which tax relief items are included. But at the end of the day, the budget is actually balanced in our state, frankly, because we have to, and we're pleased that we have to. But in D.C., you've got incredible red ink flowing, and I'm pretty nervous about where we're headed as a country. $16 trillion in debt. Think about that for a minute. $16 trillion in debt. We have got to see change happen in this year and what's occurring in Washington, or we're headed toward a very bad place, in my view. So hopefully, with our new senator, who I understand y'all have coming to Greenville to talk next week, late at the end of this week. You won't be here because you'll be in Israel, but other folks will be here and enjoying that next week. But hopefully we've got some changes that are coming, and we'll be able to see that happen. Now, as I said, in South Carolina we have a conservative majority. In fact, this past election cycle, we went from 76 to 78 Republicans in the South Carolina House. And since Republicans have been in charge, since we took control of the House of Representatives in 1994, and David Wilkins became the Speaker, leading us in that first year, since that time, there are 9,000 fewer state employees than there were in 1994. Sometimes that surprises people to hear it. But if you just look at the number of state employees, number of people on the payroll for the state of South Carolina in 1994 when David Wilkins became Speaker, and you fast forward that to today, there are literally 9,000 fewer state employees. The state budget has gone up an average of 2.5% per year during that period of time, and we've done $26 billion in tax cuts during that period of time. Now, to give you an idea how big that is, the state's general fund is about $6.5 billion, between $6 and $7 billion. $26 billion in tax cuts dating back to 1994. You can do the math. That's almost 4 years of state budget general fund dollars that we've actually done as tax cuts rather than having them be used to grow government. $17 billion of that's been since I've been Speaker, Mr. Ambassador. I just thought I'd throw that out there. But anyway, people and businesses want to come to South Carolina. I think that they want to be here for a couple of reasons. Because we have a smaller government, because we make sure that we have a low tax environment, because in South Carolina we have a very strong pro-business strategy. In fact, South Carolina is growing so fast, as you all know, we had to add the 7th Congressional District in this past redistricting. That didn't happen because there's so many babies being born in South Carolina. That happened because there's so many people who see what we have here and want to live in South Carolina and are moving down here. Just so many people moving down here. And I think that population influx is driven by opportunity. Opportunities made possible by an adherence to our conservative-minded policies. A recent Tax Foundation analysis found that, and they are a D.C. think tank, in fact you can look them up at taxfoundation.org, they found that South Carolina has the lowest taxes in the nation per capita. Taxfoundation.org, based on 2009 data and again on 2010 data. This is not only attracting retirees and working families to South Carolina who want to keep more of what they make, it's also a major factor in the creation of businesses and entrepreneurship within our state. In South Carolina, we are proudly a pro-business state. With jobs and our economy being the main focus of almost everything we do in the General Assembly. We've defended the right to work status in South Carolina, whether it's companies up here or whether it was Boeing and the NLRB, taking the fight where we had to take it. We've passed major pro-business reforms like tort reform and workers' comp reform. We've limited the amount of regulations that are allowed to be put on the books, and we've actually removed regulations from the books to make sure that we protect this pro-business environment. It's our goal to create an environment that fosters economic growth and job creation. Many of us in the General Assembly, many of us Republicans particularly believe that creating a pro-business climate is our job. That's what we're supposed to do. But the real jobs are created by the private sector, because it's the private sector, not government, that creates sustainable new jobs. In government, you can add jobs and you can add people. But if you do that, you can't sustain it without taxes. When you focus on making sure the private sector is able to, are the folks who are creating the jobs, then you're able to do that and grow the economy and reduce taxes, which is what our focus has been. Now, you play a huge part in all of this. I mean, we need your input. We need your help. We need you to help us make sure that we are doing the right thing so that more capital is making it into our economy. In South Carolina, we want that capital to go into an expanding private economy. We're not looking to use that capital to expand our government. Another difference, by the way, between Washington, D.C. and what's going on in South Carolina today. With the lowest taxes and most comprehensive tax structure, with those two things being very, very similar, they're actually very, very different issues. Lower taxes, being the lowest in the country according to the Tax Foundation, is good. But that doesn't always mean that we have the most competitive tax structure. That's why we've been trying continually to do our comprehensive tax reform effort. We knew that this would be a multi-year process. Actually, we learned that this would be a multi-year process. We've tried several different ways to get comprehensive tax reform done in the General Assembly. We passed the big bill in the House, or took up the big bill in the House, the bill that would be all comprehensive tax reform, and watched it collapse under its own weight. Because once you start trying to take up tax reform across the board where everybody's affected, almost everybody comes out of the woodwork to try to keep you from getting the bill through the process. So we made a decision last year that we'd try to do comprehensive tax reform, but that we would do it in a series of smaller bills that would address tax issues an accessible bite at a time. 2 years ago, we formed a House Republican Caucus Study Committee that actually put together a number of recommendations. Tommy Stringer, who's not here today, but is your buddy from here from Greenville, is the chairman of that committee for us. Their report addressed 8 major issues of tax reform. Areas like corporate income tax, personal income tax, lowering the overall sales tax rate by eliminating unnecessary exemptions, by cutting business property taxes, particularly manufacturers' taxes, by dealing with the assessment ratio, taking it from 2.5% to 6%. Last year, we successfully cut small business taxes by 40%. The bill that we passed lowered the small business tax rate from 5% to 3%, allowing small businesses to keep more of what they make and be able to, in most cases, most of us who own small businesses, put it back into the business. So with the elections behind us and a new session beginning, where do we go from here? In South Carolina, after the election, the complexion of the House and the Senate and the entire General Assembly was up for election. No statewide officials were on the ballot for South Carolina this year. However, in this election, as I told you a moment ago, our voters did decide to expand the House majority by 2 seats. Nationally, to be frank, Republicans took quite a shellacking. Obviously, I believe that Republicans offer much better economic and fiscal policies that I believe most Americans truly side with. However, if you can't get elected, you can't get your policies enacted. Nationally, this is something that Republicans at the national level particularly need to be able to address. Congress needs to realize that government, especially more government, isn't the solution to all of our problems. We've seen a good deal of federal expansion, particularly overreaching in the last 4 years. But the federal government's takeover of our national health care system with Obamacare by far takes the cake as one of the worst. While the recent Supreme Court ruling on Obamacare didn't strike down the law entirely, it did provide states with a few options. First of all, the court did correctly define Obamacare as what I believe it really is. That is a forced tax increase on people of this country. Something that every Democrat in Congress tried to claim it wasn't, but the court said it was. Still, something that still neither Congress nor the President have said to this day, still, neither the Congress or the President have said how we're going to pay for this incredible expansion. On the state level, the court did address Obamacare's massive new Medicaid expansion. Instead of being forced into a mandate, fortunately, each state must now opt in to various provisions of the bill. So instead of it coming from the top down and us being told we have to take it, now we're in a position where we're able to not include it simply by not opting in to a number of the provisions. And I expect you'll hear a lot from Republicans about not opting in because of the incredible cost that's involved. Well, at least in South Carolina, the solution to this unfunded government health expansion is pretty clear. Don't opt in. Defeat any opt-in amendments that we have put on the floor as we're debating the budget or debating bills that relate directly to Obamacare. In South Carolina, we're going to continue to pursue issues that we believe have made us a pro-business state. Issues that you've told us that we should make a priority. Issues our state voters overwhelmingly supported in this past election. And we must also address some major issues that have recently arisen. Obviously, the data security hacking that occurred is something that we as a General Assembly are going to have to deal with. It was one of the worst things that I have ever seen happen, probably any of us have ever seen happen within state government. The idea that our Social Security numbers and a number of credit cards, if you file electronically, then your data was probably compromised. My data was compromised, my wife's was, both my kids were. That is an incredible problem, and the biggest problem is that the horse is out of the barn. But we've got to go in and try to figure out how we deal with that. Fixing our election filing process is incredibly important. To have seen 200 plus, 250 plus people removed from the ballot across the state was, frankly, undemocratic, little d. We have got to deal with that issue. We have committees, actually, that have been appointed dealing with both of those issues. Majority Leader Bannister is heading up the Data Security Committee for us. Our port is an incredibly important engine for our state, for our entire state, especially to businesses right here in the upstate. We need to make sure that we deepen the harbor. Now, we did set aside the money to do that last year. We actually set aside all of the money to do that last year, including the federal government's share, because nobody has a clue whether the federal government's going to actually come through with things that they're supposed to come through on things that matter like this. But we know how important it is that that channel be deepened for businesses in South Carolina, so your General Assembly literally set aside all of the money to do that. And frankly, we need an inland port. The effort that you guys are working on up here right now to get that created is incredibly important, and we need to be supporting that in Columbia as well. To attract higher paying jobs, we need a highly skilled workforce, and that starts at the ground level, which is a solid education. Our education funding system has gone unchanged for over 30 years in South Carolina. A number of major changes have happened within the law that directly affects the funding formula, but the funding formula hasn't been dealt with in over 30 years. It's time that we do something about that to address it. We have passed it in the House. We did pass a bill in the House last year and did not manage to get it on through the process but we plan to take that up again because it matters a great deal. We need to connect our unemployed folks with the training they need to get reemployed, but at better jobs than the one they lost. That's the Department of Employment Workforce, DEW, that I'm talking about. And my issue with the agency is that I think that they ought to be a job-finding agency, not a check-writing agency. And I'm afraid more often than not, they collect the money from you as employers, me as an employer. They collect the money from the federal government and the state government, and then they make sure they get their checks written. That matters, but I think what's more important is that they be a job-finding agency for folks. The economy and education will be the most important issues that we deal with in South Carolina, not just this year, but for years to come. And when I talk about education like I did just a moment ago, I think it's important to note that the most important issue facing South Carolina is actually our economy. What are we going to do to lower the unemployment rate? What are we going to do to increase the average income in South Carolina? What are we going to do to help the private sector to accomplish those things? Frequently when I tell folks I think that's most important rather than education being most important, I get a little pushback from folks. But I got to tell you, I think education is actually a subset of the economy. Our goal is to have people making more money and have a better quality of life and making a living. Our goal isn't for our kids to do really good on standardized tests so we can get a magnet, put it on the refrigerator and brag about it. I mean, the goal is to help children prepare so that they have a better life. So the economy is the most important thing, but it's important that we focus on education at the same time while we're doing that. And frankly, that's the focus of most things that your General Assembly does these days. We have conversations all the time about the economy. How can we help with job creation? How can we help the Department of Commerce? How can we do things that make it easier for business to operate, lowering the small business income tax last year? How do we do things that make sure that we do all we can to help in the economy? That will remain the focus, I'm certain, for at least as long as I'm there, and I'm sure probably for years to come after that. Because my goal as one member of the House of Representatives is to make South Carolina a better place to live, to work, to raise a family. And I know that your legislators, whom I've introduced to you in this room, that's their goal also. That's what we're after. That's the bottom line. And I know that I'll be working on it, your delegation will be working on it, and I know that you folks will be working on it and supporting your members as we work hard to try to make sure that can happen. We know we can always count on your support. Deb, thank you so much for allowing me to be here with you today. It's been a pleasure to join you.
Thank you. Let's take a seat.